Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood, and my co-host is Robert Paul Johnson. And we are the Last Nighters. You can find us on the Liberty Movement's YouTube channel and also at lastnighters.com. Tonight we're going to be talking about the May-trix Revolutions. It's the third in the trilogy, and we are continuing our series of the month of May, doing May-trix, which is, of course, very dorky of us. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/177. And we have a guest who has been on very, very recently. In fact, he was on just 3 or 4 episodes ago talking about Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut. It is Mike C. of Mechanical Dream Revolution. He's a good friend of ours, and he makes musical, thematic, mimetic, cinematic, musical stories, narratives, and other good stuff. And welcome back to the show, Mike. I think that you said that you had a couple of things that you might be able to pre-release for our guests or our listenership. Welcome back.
Oh, hey, yeah, thanks. I got my own personal Don King going on there with the alliteration. I like it. Mike C. I make music for these guys about the issue of property rights and stuff like that in movies. I find it interesting. I don't know.
No, I'm a big fan. I'm like,
I've lost my mind recently. Exactly what I want to say. I've just fucking lost my mind. I don't know how much longer I can take the insanity of this hysteria anymore. But, yeah.
Like Susan Patter says, stop the insanity, buddy.
It's been weird. It's been a weird couple of years. I did not see it coming like this. I was warned by the James Corbett, and a lot of other conspiracy guys. I just didn't see it coming this way. I thought it was going to be a bit more hands-on. A little less of that velvet glove, more the iron fist.
Yeah,
that's where my head's at today.
Doing it to ourselves at this point.
That kind of, that is kind of the control mechanisms of the state and stuff. Is maybe we could transpose onto this movie in quotation marks. Yeah, I'm back for you, so that I'm going to be releasing probably a couple weeks, so you guys can have that early if you want. You heard it, Dan?
Yeah, I heard most of it, and I've also been listening to the workout album, the new one that you had released. We put that on the show notes page for Eyes Wide Shut, and so we could put it on for this one as well.
Yeah, that's pretty solid. Oh, I was thinking too, you could do Man Against Time, which is that that tribute to Keanu that I did back in like 2015.
Yeah, you got the Johnny Mnemonic in there. You got a bunch of other stuff.
It's pretty fun. It's basically all the movies that we love him for. I'm just gonna be working on the next installment of that idea now that he's done. Oh, he did Cyberpunk 77 and he did Bill and Ted's, and now he's doing the May-trix for us. So when that comes out, I'll just rip all the audio and see what I can do with it.
Yeah, throw some John Wick in there, and make sure that you throw in the Wild Stallions.
Wild Stallions, yeah. Well, that's that In Time. I did a remix of the In Time song, which is when they go to the future in Bill and Ted 1, and there's that song in the background where they're all doing the strum, and then they just say their 2 lines.
It's real fuzzy. I haven't seen that in probably 20 years.
I don't know. For 20 or 30 years, I don't know. When did I see that? It would have been like 15 or something. So for a very long time, that song has been just on the back of my head. And then in 2015, I did this and I just remixed it. So it was kind of cathartic at the time. Yeah.
Well, we'll have links to all that at lastnighters.com/177, and people can find your work on SoundCloud, Mechanical Dream Revolution. No spaces, couple of caps at the first letters of various words in the name there. But let's start off with the Google description, which is how we do. And let me see if I can make this big enough for me to be able to read it. So the May-trix Revolutions is the third movie. Came out in 2003. It's got a 6.8 out of 10 on the IMDb, 35% Rotten Tomatoes, 2.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and 89% of Google users like it. I'm a little bit surprised by that. The description reads, in a dystopia overrun by robots, Neo, played by Keanu Reeves, mankind's greatest hope, is trapped in a limbo world. Meanwhile, the majority of the planet's population remains in a state of suspended virtual reality. The few humans who are cognizant of the grim realities of the world desperately try to hold off their mechanical enemies long enough for Neo to escape and save the day. but things turn disastrous when all-powerful computer program Agent Smith, played by Hugo Weaving, arrives in the flesh. Release date November 5th, 2003. Directors Lana and Lily Wachowski. Box office of $427.3 million on a budget of anywhere between 110 up to $150 million. Robert, your opening bid, please.
Oh, here we are. We're at Revolution's The Leftover Matrix movie. This is what was left over to do after Reloaded. It's such not even a complete movie. It almost nothing happens in this thing. We know that there's gonna be a big fight, and that's about it. And all the dialogue is just like, oh man, what a big fight we're gonna have. Oh, I don't like this big fight we're having. This big fight, man. I hope I get to see stuff. They invent characters that care about characters just to have some kind of human emotion in this movie. Like we get introduced to Link's significant other in this movie, and she's worried about Link because he's out on the Logos. And then we're supposed to kind of feel like, oh no, are they going to be able to see each other again? This movie was such a non-movie. I felt almost nothing. There was no real climax. There was just a bunch of cool pictures. There were some cool scenes, a whole lot of CGI, shooty, bang, bang stuff. And then the fight was so anticlimactic. I felt nothing. This movie, the entire movie felt like you're just going downhill. Like you're just in a car and you're going downhill and everything is just really easy and you expect everything and nothing surprises you and you don't really feel anything. You don't even feel the rush of going downhill, but the movie is going downhill because there's no peaks and valleys. It's just a straight shot. And I could see why most people were disappointed with it. I certainly was on rewatch. I thought compared to this, Reloaded looks so much better just because there was actually something happening. Characters had decisions to make. Even Neo's decision to, go in and sacrifice himself to beat Agent Smith one last time. It's like, how many times does this guy have to kill Agent Smith or beat Agent Smith? That's probably why it felt so anticlimactic. It's like they kept ramping things up, but to the point of pointlessness. It's like watching a Dragon Ball Z fight. You just pretty images on the screen. I don't know. The whole movie was a whole lot of flash and no substance. And it's a really disappointing finale for the Matrix series. I don't know what else to say. I'm sure there's probably a whole lot of cool symbolism that we'll get into. I know Mike's got a whole bunch of notes, and I really do want to hear them. I want to hopefully get some kind of positive appreciation for this because I was really disappointed. I think it's by far the weakest movie of the three. So hopefully Mike can raise my spirits a little bit here.
Yeah, a lot riding on your shoulders there, Mike. Your soon to be buffed out shoulders, as we were talking to the pre-show bonus content. You got
we'll see what happens.
The new weight set. But I gotta concur with a lot of what you're saying, Robert. In fact, this movie was just kind of happening before my eyes over the course of 2 nights. My wife and I were watching it, and you're just kind of watching it, and you're not quite sure what's going on, and then you sort of doze off for a minute, and then you sort of jolt yourself back. You're did I miss anything? I'm I don't think I did. I don't really know what the point of what's going on here. And the weird thing is Reloaded finishes in such a way to where it leads directly into this one. So it's almost as if they intended this to be just one long 5-hour movie and they just, chopped it at one point. And then you kind of expect them to resolve a lot of things that were brought up in Reloaded. And I'm not sure they really do that here. It feels like they just sort of pick right up, but then drop a lot of what was leading up to what you thought was going to happen in this one.
Yeah, a
I'm
lot
just
of the.
I'm just reading reviews on IMDb. There's a lot of 10s.
For this film.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of 1s. I'm not saying there's more 10s than 1s, but I am very interested when people are in love with things.
Yeah, well, so there is one sort of take on this, and that is the Mark Passio presentation. We talked about this with Pat McFarlane last week, where he goes through. Mark Passio gave a presentation that was like 2 hours long, talking about all three of the movies and what each of the characters represent, and that the first movie answers the question, what is the Matrix? The second question in the second movie is why is the Matrix? And then the third one, and this is the one that people are more resistant to as far as like the message in it, is how do we get out of it? And his argument is that this one was not well received because people's minds aren't ready to accept the information being presented here in the allegory. Now, I don't know if I get what the message is. He's talking about Trinity representing hope and heart, and that's what gets us out of the Matrix. And he's likening this to what's happening in the real world. And this presentation was in, I want to say 2013. So I wonder what he thinks of the world these days. Because back then he was talking about how we're sort of in this technological prison.
I mean, part of it is that the ideas are something that you would want to resist, and I think a good chunk of this is the studio's fault. I think that they wanted another hit with a similar aesthetic, and they are people that don't have any creative ability, so they hired, the Wachowskis to come back, and they said, we want another return on our investment, but since we have this in place already, all the the investments have already been made, we should be able to just kind of input a bit more operating capital and get another couple of hits out of you guys without, a lot of time or effort, right? And
well, my understanding was that this was shot back to back with Reloaded.
Yeah, and I just at first glance, it needs 10 rewrites. There's characters that are redundant and useless, and it plots all over the place. It's just not tight. They just needed to rewrite it 10, 20 times, hammer it down so that it's down to its the first movie is quite a tight script. Every scene moves things forward. Did you end up listening or watching that video I sent by Sideways on the analysis of the score?
Yeah, so that would take work. So no, I did not.
Well, not listening to people talk on YouTube doesn't take work. Anyway, he just did a really quick analysis that was based on a dissertation, and the music in the movie is quite brilliant, and it continues to be brilliant. It carries a lot of the weight. Almost makes it less of a failure.
Yeah, I actually noticed the music in this one was more annoying to me, as it was more traditional thematic scoring.
Yeah, I just yeah. Well, you get in the first movie, they use the human voice to represent the humans, so you get this sometimes whenever and then you can hear one voice when he's getting he's just taking his red pill and getting the tubes out of his face or whatever, and then as he looks over and he sees all the humans, you get the chorus of humans, stuff like that. There's very good music theory in the movie is what I'm saying, which really added to the experience. And what the fuck? Anyway, god damn it, there we go. In the last one, you do get the final showdown is this big it's almost like a Duel of the Fates by John Williams, except it's good, and I think that fight scene is a bit better. Certainly, the characters in this final battle were more developed than Darth Maul. I'm not defending the movie. I'm just saying there are some parts of it that are, pretty good. And yeah, I think there's just so many underdeveloped things in this script. And the CGI is not, they didn't do all they did it kind of analog the first time, right? They had all the cameras set up in a in a circle, right? And then when you get to the Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions, it's all just CGI. It looks like shit. There's
Yeah,
just
you get into
there's
video
no weight
games.
to it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like, and that's fine. I mean, it was pushing the envelope, but yeah, I think the studio just said, "Hey, here's some more money. You know, you can do this, but you need to make it in X amount of time." And so what I'm assuming is they got the first one done. They got the negative feedback on it, and they went, "Okay, well, what can we tell these guys to do to make it a bit better or whatever?" So they probably tried to fix some of the problems, but it's just
Well,
like, yeah.
if we had to dumb down what is the story of Revolutions, because I didn't get it in watching it, and maybe I'm just a dumb guy.
Okay,
But
well, I think it is actually needed because like you look at the first movie and it's very much like Exodus or Plato's allegory of the cave or whatever. But there's a very revolutionary theme to this, and revolutionary, like true revolutionary ideas are quite violent and binary in their nature. So it's all well and good to embrace the ideas, but like when you're talking about like other people that are in the system need to be killed or whatever, I mean those are pretty aggressive ideas, and so it is interesting to take a step back and then examine the Messiah complex that we have and the use of the concept of revolution as a means of control, like as a steam release valve.
okay, yeah, we kind of were talking about that in Reloaded because that seemed to be the premise that they were setting up, is that all of these different elements are actually control mechanisms themselves, up to and including the Oracle and Neo himself. That they are
Yeah, so
all forms of control or of illusion of being able to affect change. So is that control versus choice? Whereas in this one, I don't know if they don't seem to continue that theme. They just sort of
well, they tried.
meander.
Well, okay, so in the first Matrix, you get basically Neo as like Moses, or like essentially what the Jewish Messiah should have been, or what they sort of prophesized, where he's a bit more of a warrior king, leading them out of the oppression to the promised land. And in this, you get more of a Christian Messiah of self-sacrifice, and so a lot of this movie covers the divergent paths of the individuals that evolve that come out of the Matrix in the form of Neo and Smith as sort of opposites of nihilism and then self-sacrifice for the community kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I kind of get that.
Feet on that and then like go from there, because like the revolutionary thinking is then the product of the Matrix, and it is fundamentally a binary. And when you end up in binaries, when you end up in that kind of thinking, you end up in the same problem. You end up with the same problem, and the system of control can just be, cycled back, right? Revolution. So I do like the ambition of this film, and I think they cover a lot of interesting ideas that other people weren't willing to take on. So I can't. Like, it's not like they were pretentious. Like, there's a lot of movies that fail because the people involved are like pretentious dicks, and this just failed because they took on too much, and they tried to produce it in a very short amount of time. I think that if they just like, I don't know, I wrote down like, why is there no like the Merovingian character, right? But like, why isn't there a human version of him? Like, a lot of this movie fails because all of the bad guys in the movie are all programs. They're just interacting with more and more programs. There's no cipher in this movie where there's like somebody that's like, well, I don't really want to be part of your fucking war. I want to actually just live my life, right? And like, because the Merovingian is essentially like a private profiteer, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is that Bane guy, and that is a bridge for Smith to break into the real world of Zion. And actually, that guy, it was kind of amazing that he had the same intonation and dialect and manner of speaking as Agent Smith.
He did a pretty good Smith impression.
Yeah, I was impressed by that.
Yeah,
but that annoyed the shit out of me.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, it annoyed the shit out of me that he was so obviously Smith,
Oh
and
yeah, then
Neo and
didn't get it.
Trinity were just like the biggest fucking retards in the whole movie.
Well, it
He
was
uses
okay.
the exact same intonations. He uses the exact same language as Smith, someone who Neo is intimately familiar with, and he's like herp a derp, squirp a werp the whole
the
time.
thing, okay, they're in the movie, and we have the benefit of knowing that we're watching the movie. You know, like.
But the whole time, Neo is like
Okay, so
essentially transforming into this machine character. He's having the ability to affect machines, but it's outside of his understanding that a machine could enter
he
a
probably
human.
should have saw some aura or something, perhaps. But again, they didn't take the time to figure out what the rules of the universe were as they expanded it, and reduce the script down to its most essential components. And that, you know, yeah, I mean, you're right in that sense. But at the same time, it's like, you know, if somebody's gonna attack me in real life, there isn't a soundtrack that says "ooh" as it's gonna happen, right? Like, I don't have the benefits of living in a narrative existence, so I can forgive when characters in a story, you know, don't have the benefits of like the soundtrack playing and interesting angles, you know, with the camera to tell me that this person's evil, right? Because they're just kind of looking at him.
The only human beings who have ever called him Mr. Anderson are Zero. The only character he's ever known in the films that have called him Mr. Anderson is Smith.
So that should have been like in a better script. That would have been something that tipped him off, and then I don't know, in a better script that
this whole movie was half baked. It needed, like you said, 10 script rewrites.
Yeah, 10.
It needed to be way. There is a good movie. If you combine Reloaded and Revolutions, there is a good movie in there somewhere.
Oh, there's 3 movies.
You cut out like an hour. There's a good movie.
I think that honestly, for what they wanted to take on, they needed as much time as they spent. But they just spent that time absurdly in a lot of ways.
Side questing. Yeah.
I just like I don't know, like what the fuck was Morpheus doing the whole time? Like he wasn't really in the movie, and he was, you know, pretty essential. Yeah. Somebody wrote
nothing to do. Morpheus had nothing to contribute. The Oracle was just kind of like a cheerleader. Didn't really do or say anything.
Yeah, nothing was reduced or refined. Style over substance. They basically took the aesthetic of the Matrix, and the studio said, "Okay, make us another one." And then they started making another one, but you know, and you get like a yes man situation too, right? Where like there's nobody holding you back. Like the first Matrix would have been a really hard sell for the studio. Like, I want a bunch of money. We're not experienced. And this is it's like a film noir cyberpunk allegory of the cave philosophy thing with people fighting kung fu in slow motion.
And it's awesome.
Is there a single character in this movie that does anything remotely interesting?
They come close. I'm on your side, man. I'm just saying that there's some really great ideas in this, and it's a shame. Like, this is almost a good example of why IP rights shouldn't exist, right? Like we should be paying for the development of things, not the distribution, right? Because the studios are the people that have no fucking concept how to create art, and we should just be paying the artists directly to come together and crowdsource it, give them $100 million, and say, just take your time. And then they give us back some, you know, stuff when we do screenings, and people like, you know, remix that and make fun of it or whatever, and then they go back to the drawing board, and the whole process, you know, achieves what it sets out to, instead of having these sort of the wrong constraints. So they had the wrong constraints, and then they had constraints they had limitlessness in the way that they shouldn't have either, right? Because like we've seen with George Lucas, what happens to artists when they have too much money.
Yeah. I think I tend to agree with Mike. I think the production studio or the studio heads were just like, hey, we want to cash in on this. Give us something, and this is how much time you have, and we don't care. The script makes no sense. It doesn't make me feel anything. It didn't It doesn't make my pee-pee throb. It doesn't make my heart throb. It doesn't make my brain do anything but a flat line the entire time.
Well,
but
but
it's got pretty pictures and things move around and stuff explodes. So it's going to make us money.
I mean, Zion gets
Yeah.
attacked, and that's, I don't know, kind of cool, I guess.
I
It's weird,
don't
though,
even
because,
know.
well, what's weird is like they attack Zion, and then they're in there, and then it's like they have to drill through again. So they call it, I guess, the dock, but I guess it's not clear to the audience how Zion's really
It's
constructed.
terrible.
Because
Like, again, there's like, you look at these redundancies, right? There's this council, this war council, or I don't know if they were elected officials or what, but they're the elders, and it's just like so. Well, I wrote down the G slur here. Rule by council is lame. Which is that's ableist. But anyway, I like the idea that hope is an indulgence, but it's like there's those two characters. The one sort of guy that's at odds with Morpheus. I can't even remember his name.
Locke.
Locke, right? So Locke, and then the other guy that is leading the kind of front line.
Asian older dude guy.
They have similar sort of like demeanor. They have similar facial features, and like if you rewrote that script, you would make them the same character.
Yeah.
And you would change the scenes, and you would not have two. There'd be one thing that they have to defend, and then there could be a story arc with if you want to have that kid in there, then maybe that kid's inspiration changes Locke's pessimism,
something.
shit like that. Like, it's not fucking rocket science. Yeah.
It's screenwriting 101.
Yeah. I liked that Asian guy, the hardcore general guy or whatever he was.
Yeah, but he's on the screen to do what? To yell and then die, and then that's it.
Again, it's just like generally when you shake it and then you see what doesn't make sense, and then you sort of say, okay, well, what if I combined these two things, and then that would just serve both those functions? And I mean, that's just economics, right? So,
and you would do more by doing that, because then each one would have a purpose, so that would be a less is more situation. The other thing that
absolutely,
I think that the story here is maybe telling us that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Because when Neo is meeting with whatever that being is, the AI at the end, where he says, what is it that you want? And he says, I want peace. And that he's willing to fight Agent Smith because Agent Smith is a thorn in the AI's side. And so they're coming to an alliance, and that's going to bring the peace between the two because they have a common interest in defeating Smith. At least I think that's what was going on. And then Neo, has this rumble tumble fight for the third or fourth time in the movie or in the series with Agent Smith, which I don't even know how he wins, other than he just gets the shit kicked out of him, and then he keeps getting back up. And it's like Smith is incredulous that he keeps getting up. And he's like, why do you keep getting up? And that's what defeats Smith. Like, he just can't handle it, so he explodes.
His head explodes.
Yeah, because he just can't comprehend why someone would keep trying against all odds or whatever. And it goes back to the other thing where at the end of the first Matrix, Neo has no problem fighting Smith at all. He can do it one-handed, barely paying attention. The second movie, it's harder for him. And in this one, Smith kicks the shit out of him. So it's not like, as a moviegoer, I'm not like seeing Smith do anything all that more amazing, other than there's just 1,000 of him. And in the last one, the last fight, he's only fighting the one Smith, not the 1,000.
Yeah, so they both evolved, right? So they both Neo and Smith come out of the Matrix, and they both become individuals within that system. And then you have the two divergent paths of essentially nihilism and self-destruction, and that's kind of what systems of thought produce, versus the path of a more sort of righteous Christian allegory person.
So basically what you're saying is that there's some high-minded idea behind this, but they didn't really execute it that well, because it doesn't...
Yeah, they didn't really explain why they're even, like, why... Yeah, because Smith essentially evolved from that act, right? Like, he was liberated from his programming the same way Neo was.
But to Daniel's point, there should have been communicated visually.
Oh, yeah, no, they didn't communicate that.
Yeah, in the first movie, like Daniel said, Neo is just wiping the floor with Smith at the end of the day. and then they're doing the same exact moves, the same exact martial arts at the same exact speed, and for some reason Neo is losing. You have to go into some weird hypothetical whatever to kind of like justify it in your mind why this is happening when there should have been some visual explanation.
Well, now
Like,
there's
Smith
flying
should have
and
just been
whatnot.
faster. Smith should have been faster. He should have been stronger. He should have been something that Neo couldn't handle for some reason, some kind of explanation as to why the one couldn't beat this guy.
Well,
Where he
our
could easily
self-destructive nature is quite strong until we find some sort of belief, right? Which is what the Oracle represents.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. It isn't. It's like, yeah. So the Oracle, and like saying, "Oh, this person represents this," is a sure sign that a movie has failed. Because like, you watch a really good allegory and such, you can say that as a placeholder, but it usually isn't like 100%, right? So when you're pushed to a position where you have to say, okay, well, this person represents this, and this person represents this, and this is the allegory happening, I think the movie's failed at that point. Because, like, obviously, if I've got those reduced points, then I just really need a couple of sentences to explain the idea. I don't really need to have a 2-hour movie. That's my position. It's just the economy, right? But if the Oracle seeks perpetuation and represents belief, right? And the Architects is the social construct, you know, and then from the social construct you get like the different divergent of the individual, Neo and Smith, right?
So maybe one of
Like
you guys can explain this. But when Smith goes to the Oracle, we're led to believe that he destroys her or something in some way. But at the end of the movie, the Oracle's sitting there talking to the Architect. So she obviously survived. And I also think that when Smith explodes, isn't there like a split second where you see the Oracle as the after result of the explosion of Smith?
Well, she's laying there on the ground after Smith in that crater.
Right. So is that saying that Smith like absorbed
Smith has been
her?
destroyed, right, and then he has been removed from the equation, leaving behind the Oracle. I guess he could have also left behind all the other thousands of people he absorbed, but that one was the strongest version of Smith, was the one that absorbed the Oracle, I guess.
Okay, yeah. I mean, like, it's no fun to talk about the plot holes in this movie and the lack of structure, because it's terribly written. It's like making fun of The Room. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's terrible. It's a terrible film in that sense. But like the ideas in it, right? Like, yeah, and if you have to go to ancillary works to understand why there's motivations for this or that, like, that's horseshit to me too, right?
For sure.
So the Animatrix and some comic books, I'm sure, will give you all the answers you need. But that means the movie failed.
Yeah, there was a reviewer that was saying that the video game that came out right after this negated the ending of this. And I've never played the video game, so I'm not sure what they're talking about.
Are they talking about the Path of Neo or the other one?
I don't know. They're just referring to a video game that they said has a better ending and negates the ending that is in Revolutions.
I guess. Hey, I wonder if they're talking about the Path of Neo, because I actually sent you the link in your Google Hangouts. Because at the end of Path of Neo, you go through the movies as Neo in the video game. It's a really fun game to play, actually. And then at the end, when you fight, you get there and you're supposed to fight, you know, the May-trix, and you have to self-sacrifice or whatever. The Wachowskis pause the game and then just sit down on two like 8-bit couches as 8-bit characters and explain the ideas they're talking about for about 90 seconds. And then they say, but Christian allegories aren't really very good for a video game ending, so here's a giant robot to fight. And
Interesting.
I really like that. Yeah, no, because essentially It's about overcoming the nihilistic sort of self-destructive tendencies of the individual as we come out of society, as we come out of the matrix, right? And so, like, what do you do? Well, why do you persist? Is what he asks him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because I choose to, and then we talk about choice and stuff like that, right? And so, like, back to the Oracle, she's knowing the cost of a choice is what makes that choice real. If you don't know the cost, if you can't do a cost-benefit analysis, you're not able to really choose. And so that's an interesting concept, right? So she talks about how she lost her form. She lost that outer shell or whatever. The actress died, but they decided that this was the reason, right? She helped somebody, and that person essentially betrayed her, and she ended up losing one of her layers of programming or something. And she's okay. She says, I made the choice, and now that I know the cost, I've truly made the choice because I would make that choice again. No, those are interesting ideas to sort of bang around, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that was just written in because the other lady died. Like that, they would not have done that had the same.
Well, they in the first movie though, it's like, would you have still broken the vase if I hadn't said anything about it?
Right.
These little mind fucks, right? So like, why do you persist? Is Smith's position, and Neo's rejoin is because I choose to. And so it's about choice within a system of control. It's about what choice we actually have in a determinist sort of system. What our choice is real if we don't know what the outcomes are.
Right. And it's almost a motivational thing. Like you listen to your workout tapes because you listen to Stallone talk as Rocky about overcoming difficulties and beating insurmountable odds. And so that's why one would persist, because they think that they can eventually overcome if they will themselves to it.
Yeah, so you get down, this is, a lot about the human condition and like sort of what we have to do to get by. I don't know, I wrote down some shit here. Basically, the Messiah complex is part of the oppressive matrices, and the only way to break through is... Oh, yeah. So we have to get out of the cycle of rebellion, because that's just another control function, right? And so, like, I guess, like, Trinity just ends up being love in this sort of what the characters mean, right? And love is an anomaly of chance within a system that shouldn't have that. Which allows us to form between people or single points that create a specific network of information. Such connections can form a network, or individuals can choose then, and by way of love of various metrics, ultimately forming a matrix of mass consciousness, structure of individuals. That's crazy, eh? Okay, so individuals can learn to choose within this sort of matrix that we're looking at, and then by whatever metric that you have for forming bonds. So we have a metric of like 3 individuals here, like where we have 3 sort of metrics. I've decided to judge you, and I've decided to judge you, and we have a back and forth in these 2, right? And we've ended up forming a specific network of individuals.
Yeah.
And from that you get so there we go. But from that you get from these bonds and free choice between individuals, you end up with a matrix or a network that's built from the ground up, instead of a system that's trying to homogenize, which is the death. Like, homogeny is death to any system, because a single successful virus can wipe it out, right?
Okay, so having the diversity makes it robust and resistant.
Yeah. So and the Messiah complexes and the revolutionary complex are part of control mechanisms. So they're talking about the sacrifice of self and the reaching out to other individuals and forming a matrix, as it were, from the ground up, and anarchically. So in that sense, you guys should be behind it.
So is the story then saying that this is the 6th or 7th time that the one, Neo, has come through and met the architect and made certain decisions, and always ended up failing and basically setting a reset? So in this movie, it's the final time, and he actually, instead of fighting the Matrix, he common enemy defeats Smith for the Matrix and desires peace. And so then the machines stand down when they're attacking Zion. So this sort of breaks that cycle. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Or more simply, you don't have to take either pill. Like, they present a dichotomy, and it's a false dichotomy. You can take the red pill or the blue pill. And the red pill people need to, like, murder all the blue people because they're trying to overthrow the system. You can just know that you're in a system of people, and you can just exist within it freely.
Right,
and
like
you can
Cypher would have done.
Yeah. Well, Cypher wanted the blue pill.
Yeah. Well, he wanted.
I mean, but it is.
But he would.
But you don't need to take either pill. You can just say no, thanks. Thanks for letting me know that I'm inside of a system. I'll bear that in mind,
Sure.
and I'll act accordingly. And you can use, you can manipulate the system, and you can run up walls, but you don't have to be part of some fucking war.
Well, when Morpheus offers him the pills, yeah, they do say he has to take one or the other, right? But
yeah,
he could have refused.
But he wanted a Messiah, right? Morpheus wanted the prophecy to be true. He wanted a leader to bring him forward, and the Messiah is the problem in a lot of ways, right? And I don't mean just like, I think that like natural leadership hierarchies can form, and we can be subordinate and dominant of each other without, like organically. But the cult of personality obviously isn't good. And then you end up with this sort of like Trump and Biden, or even Bernie Sanders. Like the reason people adore those politicians is because they think that they're bringing about some sort of change. That's always what they sell, right? So that's kind of what I took from it, which I thought was interesting. I wish they had not failed miserably, but they probably had other stuff on their mind, like cutting their dicks off or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if they're transitioned or not. But like, and to be clear, I do like even their like liberal propaganda, like in Sense8. I was saying in the pre-show, like I like all of their crazy shit, and I don't have any problem with them transitioning at all. For the record, and not just for the record, I actually don't give a shit. But it's interesting. I wonder, like they must have just had too much on their plate. Do you know what I mean?
When they were making this one, yeah, maybe.
And it's just like, hey, you got to make this in 6 months. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Are you crazy? I wanna make a movie that's an action movie that simultaneously like deconstructs the Messiah idea and the hero complex. And they did a better job of this than Last Jedi. Still, like they didn't just try to subvert the ideas. They actually tried to deconstruct how narrative and how these like sort of like this sort of binary of rebellion and revolutionary thinking does hold us back as individuals. Like, this is a really brilliant Christian allegory, or it could have been a really brilliant Christian allegory, in a way that's kind of a new take on it. So but I guess the Hollywood execs were just like, hurry up, I need my 14-year-old fucking prostitutes.
All right, Robert,
you need more money.
Oh, I had a half-baked idea. I don't know. It seems like this is a series that asks questions better than it answers them. Anytime you try and finish a film, I think the first Matrix ended with so much possibility, and it was so cool, and all the thoughts inside your head were going to be way cooler than anything they could come up with, especially when they try and answer all these questions and all these brilliant ideas that they had. When you actually provide some kind of definitive answer to them, it instantly becomes way less cool. And when they try and show you what Zion looks like, and
yeah, they were swimming
this war and this battle. It's like you're taking on a whole lot. You really need to come up with something really ingenious to blow people away in any way that's going to be satisfying.
Yeah, like they took on something where they're going to be swimming upstream, and to your man's point of saying that like the ideas in it are a lot less comfortable, and acceptable. You know, you go into a movie and you're like, I want to see Hercules kill a Hydra. You know what I mean? Like, you want to see a hero that you can follow, and this is like a very different kind of hero. So like the ideas in it are a deconstruction of everything that we normally see movies for. And so if you're gonna swim upstream like that, if you really want to take on such a massive endeavor to take a think piece and some really interesting examination of philosophy and make it into an accessible action film, you better spend some fucking time and work it out. Like, it's not money. Money didn't hold them back. It's just like, it's trying to get it done. And as artists, they failed because they should have just said, well, I'm going to need more time. Or maybe they just thought they could pull it off. And there's a lot of sophomoric ideas in the first one. Like, it's a lot easier to manage. So maybe they just thought that, okay, we'll just keep, I've read a few more books about, about existentialism. Maybe we can just expand on this and hammer it out. And, I wouldn't even call that too arrogant. It just, people make mistakes.
And a lot of people try to make a film and they fail in the execution, and it's a huge movie with a lot of moving parts. But I really think that the movie fails at its most fundamental level, at the script level. And there's obviously that still costs money to have people write scripts and it takes time. But
what it costs,
nothing compared to once the film starts going in motion.
The part that it really bothers me is that it doesn't cost anything for the Wachowskis to hang out alone and work on a script and hammer out a script. It costs the studio their profit that they think they should have. Like, I'm sure there was pressure on them, and they probably shouldn't have buckled to that pressure.
Yeah, they probably thought that they had a really hot commodity and that it was losing something by not being in front of viewers at the time. And like, we really need to rush to get this thing out. I mean, Star Wars still had a monster hit when they did the prequels 20 years after the original trilogy.
They should have known, because you can make Tron Legacy fucking 30 years after Tron, right? You can just make movies later if you want to.
Yeah, the first one was just 99, and then Reloaded was mid 2003, and then Revolutions was 5 or 6 months later. They could have.
So I mean, 4 years is not. I mean, that's a pretty quick turnaround. Like, that isn't absurd.
Well, especially since that was when they were released. I mean, these were huge CGI budgets for the time, and probably took about a year at least for the CGI, if not more like probably 18 months.
That looked pretty rushed too, though, right? So,
but they were but they had a lot to do. Like, it's not. They probably had to develop a whole lot of stuff.
This is what I mean, though. Is I mean, there's a huge juggernaut that you had to keep moving, and they should have just made sure their ducks were in a row before they started. But again, you can't fault somebody for thinking they can pull something off and then just failing miserably sometimes. Shit happens.
Yeah, I could have seen this being back-to-back, summer blockbusters, and spend another.
That's what they wanted, right? And I was actually traveling in Australia at the time, so like, Reloaded was kind of a godsend. I was like, oh shit, okay, I'm gonna go to a movie, because when you're traveling, it's all, well, there's not really any shock, the whole culture shock thing. You're just like a normal person, and then about 3 months in, you're like, oh, I hate everyone here. Why can't you guys just talk normal and use the right words for your signs and things, and just and so you're like, okay, so I start, like, when a movie I really want to see comes out, it's a bit of a godsend, right? So I watched that one, and then I ended up I was working on a resort up north by the time the next one came out, and so the theater in the main sort of city there was having a marathon to release the new one at midnight. So with my spouse, I watched the Matrix 1, 2, and 3 in a row, and I swear to God, when Trinity was dying, it felt like an eternity, because I'd been in the theater for like 5 hours or 6 hours at this point, and Trinity is just dying and dying and dying forever. Like, it was terrible. That's maybe the worst death scene in cinematic history, and it's like,
really bad.
It's
And
like,
there's-
Jesus Christ, what the? Why am I still watching this? Yeah, I
And
think I
after
talked about it.
3
It's only like
movies-
3 minutes.
I should have felt something when she died, and I didn't. And I should have felt something when Neo died, and I didn't. It's really bad. No excuse.
Like, I
for
was
that.
just kind of exhausted at that point. You know?
Wait, Neo died?
Yeah, he. So that's the thing.
I
Is
guess.
it's the annihilation of self to avoid self-destruction, right? Like, that's terrible. So to avoid the nihilistic suicidal tendencies of the ego, you need to find a higher path. So maybe that's why they call it the path of Neo. I don't know. That's the path of the one. But I sent you the like diet. It's a minute 43. I think you'd really like it actually, because it literally just explains what they were thinking in the movie.
Okay.
What's funny though is like back then you could just fail and like there wasn't the same backlash. We like nobody liked it. We have a bit of hate, but nobody's. I don't know if they got death threats or anything, but like there wasn't the same. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't quite as beloved, but it feels like it was. Like to a lot of people, you know, wearing trench coats and sunglasses.
I mean, it did well at the box office, as far as I can tell, 400 and some odd $million. I'm sure that with all the marketing and whatnot, it probably didn't make.
Well,
a
you
whole
have to
lot.
see the end.
Yeah, got to see the end, man.
Basically, they in the first movie they wear their sunglasses because it looks cool, but they take the sunglasses off. In the sequels, they're always wearing sunglasses. It's just
In the
style
real
over
world.
substance.
Yeah,
They just
in the Matrix, not in
they
the real
just
world.
swallowed up by their own aesthetic in a lot of ways, right? And I think a bit of time would have really aired this out. But I really love some of the ideas. They just needed to cut like 80% of the characters out of the film and develop some other ideas. You know, like what the fuck is the source? Can I know what that is, please? The source? Like what is that? The force? Is it a is it a like a
Is it a hard drive
is it some
somewhere?
sort of energy field that binds us all together and we've split into two different factions? It's just I've heard it all before, but like at least they fleshed it out. Yeah, I wanted to see more humanity in the movie as well. Like the Merovingian, the Keymaker, Seraph. Like what the fuck is this Seraph guy doing? This cool Chinese guy with like a white Mandarin shirt shows up and does cool kung fu.
Yeah,
like
he's pretty badass.
Yeah, he's
yeah, but
badass.
he's a character. He's just some badass. Like Morpheus should have been sort of doing most of what he did. Him and Trinity, right? Like it's just aesthetically it mirrors.
Were either of you upset? I was when they set up this scene where they're shooting. They try to set up another hallway shooting scene where, except this time, they're jumping on the ceiling, but it's like dumb. And then they get into they're at the Merovingian sex club cult thing place. And they go in and they have this big standoff where everybody's got guns at everybody else's head. And they're like, you got to give us Neo. And he's like, okay, I will. But you got to give me the eyes of the Oracle. And
Okay,
that would have
whatever
been, at least that would have been an interesting choice for the heroes to make.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't see them actually
quest?
doing that, but it's a side quest, sure. But then the movie is just like, no, we're not going to give them any kind of interesting choice to make because Trinity's just going to like threaten to kill him and threaten to kill herself, like die right there. At least it tells you something about how she feels about Neo. I get that, but it removes an interesting choice from a character. And I hate it when movies don't let characters make interesting choices.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of interesting choices in the movie.
There were like zero interesting choices in this movie.
Yeah,
and it desperately needed a character to do something interesting in this movie. Like there's the little Indian family. What was the point of them? The little girl.
They're extra characters that could have been
love.
consolidated into other characters. It's like I don't know. There's the train master or whatever the fuck his name was.
Yeah, the train master. What was the point of that guy?
But again, I think the reason that like we're not invested is because every single antagonist is a computer program. Every single one. There's no humans. Like, we needed to examine the humanity in that situation. You know?
Yeah, I think it would have been way more interesting if you had a series of conscious cipher characters in the Matrix, human characters in the Matrix, actively
and that would
working for the
lend it.
machines.
Like, to your point, like, I don't even agree that necessarily, like, I don't think I would have been that interested in them to get the eyes of the Oracle or anything, but I hear what you're saying because it's an ethical dilemma. So, like, rather than discussing morality or whatever, like, the movie discusses a lot of, like, sort of ethical sort of quandaries, right? Like the whole existential debate. So that's like the whole cipher paradox would have been interesting to look at because it examines this sort of existential dilemma of like enlightening people and forcing them to rebel against the Matrix when they don't want to. You know, that's an interesting discussion, and it's the one they were actually trying to have. So I'm not sure why there weren't more Cypherian characters.
Yeah. Why wouldn't
yeah,
there?
I mean,
This is the perfect opportunity to have for Neo to fight actively people that were humans that had decided that no, I want this Matrix. This is fantastic. Let me have it. And then for Neo to actively confront those people and have to make that moral decision. That would have been an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Very present day
And
necessary.
Yeah, well, and it's just like, well, because like if Smith is representing sort of like a nihilistic, suicidal tendencies, you know, he's just like, idealism is an illusion, right? And so he's kind of the voice of reason in a lot of ways, considering this rebellion. So it would be interesting to like to see the more passive side of like this idea that there's no meaning or purpose, that and everything has to end. Because then you've got like the humans that are sort of the they're not like on Smith's side, but they're the sort of placid version, which is what I encountered a lot, right? Is people that just don't really care, or this sort of nihilistic thinking that there's no purpose or meaning. And you can be moralistic, like you can be morally nihilist and not, it doesn't suffer too much. But if you truly believe that there's no purpose, it's difficult to get out of bed for a lot of people. You know, so.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the train master and the whole Neo being stuck in a sort of purgatory? It seems as if it's sort of a ham-fisted attempt at putting in a Greek mythology.
It was limbo.
Yeah.
Mobile station is limbo station, right? Like they're not even going out of their way. Like that's.
And the train master is like the ferryman in Hades, right? In Greek mythology, I forget the name, but he takes you over the river. Yeah.
Oh, I think his name was Train Master.
Pretty sure, yeah, train master. But it felt like they were just fitting that in, and then just to have that moment with the computer programs that spawned an offspring, and then had developed the sense of love. And were willing to sacrifice to get her out because she was going to be deleted or destroyed. Yeah. And even though they knew that they would not be able to go with her, the fact that she would be able to continue on was important to them. So they were willing to give up very much for that, including letting her go because they would no longer be with her.
But where was she going?
With Seraph.
To
be
where?
With the Oracle. To be with the Oracle.
Figure it out. They'll figure it out.
Oracle still in the Matrix then.
Well, you don't like. I wouldn't even call that a reasonable criticism because, like, you know, her going away to safety is fine. As long they don't have to tell me where. Zion, I guess.
I think it'd be nice if it made sense to the viewer.
Well yeah, because
it would be nice.
The train
they're trying to explain love, though.
Right, but it was supposed to be the connection between the Matrix world and the real world, right? And so they were smuggling her out of the Matrix, utilizing that transfer. And so, yeah, we should have seen her in Zion.
Pop out on a jump drive.
Oh, wow, what a crazy idea. Have a conclusion to that thread of the story, for sure.
Considering that if she had been the one who came out and then was with what's her name, Z, who was with the butch-haired girl
Shooting
who
the
was
rockets.
shooting the rockets. Yeah, she came out of nowhere, and then she died.
Like,
So
oh, this isn't.
she had like a 5-minute, like heroic scream
This
moment.
fight's not
Introduction and then
diverse
death.
enough.
This movie
Like
has way too many characters that show up and die.
So
and
again, I mean, I'm not sure if that's even a studio. That might have been the Wachowskis being a bit like, sort of liberally minded, right? Because they were kind of, I mean, they were ahead of their time for sort of this. I wouldn't like, they're not like, part of this fucking globalist agenda, but they're certainly like advocating for a lot of the ideas within that agenda, that agenda sort of leverages, right? The tolerance and stuff. So they were probably very interested in putting, a very diverse group of rebellion against a very homogeneous, the Matrix, right? And that's, I don't know, that's fine to me. Like, I don't know, that's always been kind of a story, is a ragtag group of individuals that come from all different races and creeds. So the reason they had so many of those characters, though, is to try to visually tell that, is that we need every height and every body type and every sex and race and all the different styles of character. So it just ended up bloated instead of having, just a few. Because I would actually lay that on the Wachowskis.
Do you think that was an attempt to just show?
Yeah, it was
too
definitely
much? Like, this is the rebels versus the Empire, and we're going to show all the different people coming together against resists the Matrix.
Yeah. Like Lando showed up in Empire because Lucas is a talented businessman, and he knew that like a cool black guy would improve the demographic of his audience.
And Lando was a great character.
He's fantastic, but like, it's the same reason Sam Jackson was in the prequels, right? But the Wachowskis are doing it for ideological reasons, and I don't have anything against that. I just think that the fault comes from them being too invested in that. It feels sophomoric or underdeveloped artistically, like the way they attack these ideas. It felt like high school, like they were just encountering this and they really wanted to just take on everything at once. And they said, okay, and then like we're gonna have all these different characters and they're all gonna come in. It's like, well, you better make a Netflix series then, because it's not gonna work. You're writing War and Peace here, and you want to make it 2.5 hours, like.
Yeah.
So.
If you give me a character and they have 5 minutes of screen time, when they die, I don't give a shit.
It's like, I think that, like, okay, so you make the Matrix 1, and then you want to make this expansive thing. You have to realize that you can't have all those characters because you didn't have them in the first movie. You can introduce some new characters, but if the ratio is 4-1, it's not going to be good, right? So it's just a matter of, I don't know, when I'm making a piece, I try not to be attached to stuff because it's just inevitably going to hold you back. If it needs to be taken out because it doesn't fit, it needs to be taken out. And you need to take whatever emotion or whatever the nucleus of what you're trying to do, and you need to reduce it down to that. And anything superfluous has to be thrown out.
Is this a case of suffering from success where the Wachowskis made this brilliant original movie and then nobody wanted to come in and question their decisions for these sequels?
They might have had some yes men, but I think they got some pushback after the second movie that might have made the third movie even worse than what it would have been.
Yeah,
it's hard to know.
The second one's actually not that terrible upon reviewing.
Third one's not that bad.
Yeah. I
like the third one better than the second one, to be honest.
Really?
With the exception of the architect's speech at the end, but I think that's part of the next movie.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's go into that because we have to start winding down. What do you think is on the docket for 4? Are they continuing this? Do we find out if Neo did actually die? Do we learn anything? Do they close this thing out to where it makes some sense and close all these open-ended stories?
I'm not optimistic, and I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I don't know what they can do except backtrack and try to basically retell the story they were trying to tell with a different allegory that covers all the beats they should have in a more refined and economical way. That would be the ideal outcome, is if they remade these two movies secretly and passed it off as a new movie. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know what has Lana done, you know?
That's nothing that's inspired confidence in me. That's for sure.
Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And Mike, I know that you had taken some notes. So is there anything else you want to bring up before we do the final summary and review? And we'll give this, I don't know what we want to rate this out of.
Portions? I don't know. No, just a review though. The Matrix 1, we love it, but it has some problematic ideas in it that a lot of people don't examine. And so I'm not mad at them for taking on a deconstruction of those things in the Reloaded and in the two subsequent sequels. Because like this idea of just following somebody is gonna, like a war king, grant us freedom, I don't think is very it's not a very mature idea, and it's not particularly useful, except for getting people to spin themselves into, like, I listen to hardcore shit when I'm working out, you know, because it's like I have a single focus and I'm fighting with myself. But like, if you start thinking about human society in terms of everyone is your enemy, you do end up with some pretty I don't know. You can live outside this system without like forsaking humanity, I guess is my point, or human society. We got here one step at a time. You can interact with people. You don't need to see people that oppose you as people that need to be shot. So like, you know, it's fun. The first movie is fun, but I do appreciate that they tried to examine that and deconstruct it. I think that like for my own philosophy, I think that like man should win 2 out of 3 and society should win 1 out of 3. I think that's a really good ratio. So and I think that the ideas in this covered that to a large extent. They just kind of didn't really refine or bring anything home. So it sort of plays out like getting stoned and talking to your friends and then not really remembering the next day exactly how you solved the world's problems.
Yes. Happens often, I think.
But to be great, body stone.
So, Robert, you wanna lead us off with how many lines of Matrix code out of 10 that you would give this particular movie?
Yeah, sure. This might take me a little bit, but I will. I mean, why not? The whole Matrix series is a bit long-winded, even though it probably needs more fleshing out. Okay. I love the idea of revolution as a means of control, as this steam valve. There is plenty of fomenting of revolutions that is just next guy's on top, then the next guy's on top. We've said many times in this show that within the heart of within the chest of every revolutionary beats the heart of a bureaucrat. I think that's the quote. So yeah, you think you're making this big change, when in reality you're just the latest person to grasp the ring of power, and then you're the monster, and you didn't fix anything. You're going to make the same mistakes that people have been making over and over and over again. Now, let me talk a little bit about the dumb story in this movie that just makes me upset. It's not super high-minded, but it's part of the reason why this movie doesn't work for me, because there's all these high-minded philosophies and concepts that the movie's playing with that doesn't quite answer, but it also doesn't work on a basic action movie level either for me. The fact that the EMPs are only on the ships, I didn't understand why that was. The movie needed to do a better job of explaining why, because it would have made sense for the humans protecting their one city to have this amazing defense network filled with the stupid things. You'd think that if the EMPs are the only weapon that you really have against the machines, you would develop a pretty smart series of them that would be totally nuking any machines that get close to Zion on a regular basis. And that there would be entire jobs and professions that, well, I'm an EMP maker, and then I'm an EMP resetter, and I'm a rebuilder of EMPs, because these machines constantly are triggering them, and then we go out and reset them, and then that's what it is. Instead of just having like a big concrete dome, and like as soon as the machines dig down close enough, then whatever. I mean, they vaguely talked about some kind of points at which they were fighting back and that there were some defense systems, but that was all kind of done like a hand waved away to the audience. You really got to show these things and make the viewer understand the stakes and the reasons why you're showing us what you're showing us. I get it. You wanted to have this big battle sequence, but if you don't have characters we're invested in making interesting decisions filled with consequences, then I don't care. There's no tension. If there's some new character that I don't know doing things I don't understand the weight or the consequences of, I don't give a shit whether they're really struggling with the wheel and, oh my goodness, another character just said that this person's really good at steering. Why would I care? Why does that impress me? It doesn't at all. Okay. The mech units. I know it's been complained about before, but I don't know if I've said it recently, so I'm going to complain about it here too. The dumbass mech unit design that doesn't protect the user at all. We figured this out hundreds of years ago. Well, at least 100 years ago. The first design of the tank wasn't just a guy strapped to a big old metal thing. The guy was actually inside the metal thing so that the pointy, shooty things didn't get to the soft, fleshy dude inside. It makes no sense other than from a filmmaker's point of view that I want to see all the emotion on the face. You can still cut to the inside. I mean, Iron Man, he's like a big old metal man, but they cut to the inside and we'd see the face of him like reacting and emoting and stuff. You can still do that and not be completely retarded when the machines, all they have to do is like get within 15 feet of the guy and you got Dr. Octopus like stabby and the guy's dead. It's super easy. And the whole defense system of the humans, it means that they're dumb. And when characters make dumb decisions, it makes me care less about the characters. It's like, yeah. It's like when a character does something stupid in a horror movie, good. You're stupid. You deserve to die and be murdered because no rational, smart human would act that way. I want to see humans, blue-pilled humans, fight Neo. I want to see red-pilled people fighting blue-pilled people and getting into it morally and ethically and getting into it ideologically. Can I say that word properly? Probably not. But you know what I'm saying. I want there to be debates on both sides. And I want, even though if that's not super interesting to you, that's what I want to see. I doubt that we're going to get that, but it seems like the most prescient thing to do in this next movie. So I don't know, but this movie gets 4 lines of code, and mostly because it was such a letdown. I know you really need to stick the landing in these movies. And if you're going to tell a big old epic story about humans versus machines, and the first movies are so badass, then this movie was just a big fat letdown to me. And so that's what it gets.
All right. Well, that was a pretty long exposition. I appreciate that. It's very helpful. I tend to agree with the frustrations with the defense systems of the city of Zion, because if the EMPs are the only thing that's really effective, then you would put bug zappers up all around the place. You know,
that's right. Why would you invest so much in machine guns if EMPs are so much more effective? We got millions of bullets and we got millions of machine guns, but EMPs are just the thing that do it. Dumb. I know it's not super exciting, but you wanted to have this tension-filled battle, but you did it with characters I didn't give a shit about, so you fucked up.
All right. So thank you for that. Four lines of code from Robert. So I will probably agree with most of what you're saying, in that this had maybe some elements that could have been really interesting, and they had set up a lot of things in the first 2 movies that did not get resolved in this one, and so those were letdowns for me. And it's a bit unfortunate, because a lot of the ideas were philosophically, high-minded and really struggling or presenting the viewers with struggling between making choices and repercussions of those choices and seeing the downstream effects of them. And then we don't really see any of that really play out to fruition. To your point about what the 4th movie could maybe be, I like that idea of maybe he has to deal with the blue pills finally, and the red pills have to fight the blue pills, because in the first one they do talk about how these are the people who are enslaved, but they're not ready to be freed, so they are your enemy until they are free. And even after they're free, as the example of Cypher, they can still be your enemy, which, to Mike's point, is also an interesting premise that was missing from this movie. But one of the things that you said earlier, Robert, that I thought was really interesting was that when you go through these cycles of revolution, it's just the next man up, and he becomes the tyrant or the dictator. And that would be kind of a nice premise for number 4 to be, what is the result of this revolution that we see in this movie? And does it turn out to be more of the same? Hence the 7th or 8th cycle through the architect's system. That would be pretty fun. But I don't know if they're going there, but hey, if you guys, need to cram in any more ideas and you're listening, these are free. They're free. It's a free show. You can find it on most podcatchers, wherever you want to go. And if you want to give us some money, patreon.com/lastnighters or lastnighters.com/Patreon. Either way, you can probably find it. Anyway, I'm going to give it 4.5 lines of code. It was kind of incoherent. I don't really know what was going on. I think Neo died at the end. I don't know. I think he sacrificed himself. I know he's blind, but he can still see the code. So I don't know. So 4.5 lines of code. Mike, your final summary and review.
Oh, fuck. 1/4 portion. Let me just think here. This is a terrible movie that I think a lot of people should watch, because it's important to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. There's some really interesting ideas in this movie. They're hidden very carefully, with the failure of the artists and the machine, the May-trix, if you will, that makes the movies. So it's a good lesson in possibly hubris, possibly the slumlords that sort of rule our narratives, in Hollywood. I think it's very ambitious, and I do applaud the Wachowskis for taking on such an ambitious project. I think that talking about these things is, it's a lot better than pretty much everything else we get, philosophically at least. So, like I said, I think it's a terrible movie structurally, but I do urge everyone to watch it. So I recommend it. I don't know, like talking about the mechanics of the warfare and stuff. That's all just terrible writing, and I think we all would have just forgiven it had it been a better film. Like, story-wise, if the characters were more interesting, you're willing to forgive all that shit because all you want is the sort of legendary stuff anyway, the tail, right? So, I don't know. There's, yeah, like I said, it's really ambitious, and it's something that needs to be discussed. But there's no half measures in art, so 0 out of 10.
Whoa.
Is that the first 0 of all time?
Yeah, 0 out of 10, but I recommend you watch it because, like I said, interesting ideas. And I mean, if you're not willing to kill yourself for it, then like maybe you should take a step back and not take on. Just go make Speed Racer then. That was fun. Like I break my back when I'm the whole Bisbee Boy project, like season 3, I was pulling my hair out for a year. Fucking, it didn't ruin my life, but like it hurt. It was something I needed to do, and if you don't need to do stuff like that, if you don't need to commit yourself fully to it, there's no half measures. You're just producing more noise. And you can just tell a story that's more acceptable. If you want to just hammer around a bunch of fucking ideas from a book, a couple of books you read on existentialism, but like, again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, one must imagine Sisyphus is happy. Like, why do we go on? Like, why do you persist, Neo? These are interesting and crucial ideas. The self-destructive nature of the ego and our desire to destroy the world rather than admit our limitations is and the whole like love as an anomaly that connects us, and the sacrifice of self in order to make connections through love to form a more stable and sort of anarchical network of individuals that can create a better tapestry and something that can move forward as a species. I mean, these are awesome ideas, but so I recommend seeing it. Yeah, 0 out of 10.
That's a pretty impressive
Get your
score.
shit together.
Epic, Mike.
I love it. It's the artistic purity that you're striving for, and I think if all those ideas are in there, and it's hard to tell in a lot of ways, but if they are in there, then the execution just wasn't there to really make it clear. And not that everything needs to be like spelled out totally perfectly, but at least make the story interesting and concise.
I think they're capable of it. I think they could have done this. I think this could have been a masterpiece, and whatever stood in their way, they let that stand in their way, whether it was themselves or the studio or the the audience or the hubris or or the yes men. It just I don't have any sympathy. I think I don't know.
All right.
Sorry to interrupt you there. I'm fucking pissed.
All right, perfect.
I'm pissed that people don't put more effort into shit.
Well, I'm pretty sure this was still a monumental effort, but there were probably some pressures, as you were alluding to earlier, that maybe prevented them from seeing their true vision and realization. So they sort of like slide into third just barely here on this trilogy of the Matrix. And you know what? The Animatrix, which I haven't seen in quite a while, and we will watch and do next week with the return of the great Afrolibertarian, Ryan Jones will be joining us to discuss the Animatrix. He's a bit of a comic book guy, and he was also a big fan of the Matrix and wanted to discuss it. So we're going to be having him on next week. And from what I remember, the Animatrix is like 5 or 6 little vignette stories that are like prequel style to the movies, or at least a few of them are, and it sort of fills in a lot of the gaps into the story. And I like that approach, and I think that fits in really, really well in our Matrix, the month of May.
Yeah, I remember I've seen the Animatrix. It's been a while, but I do recall there are some, like the first one really tells the story of how the first AI and how, these robots were all oppressed and whatever, and then they fought back, and it even tries to explain why the mech suits are open in a stupid way.
Fucking A. If you need to go to ancillary work, the piece has failed.
Yep. No, it's true. It's true.
Well, that'll be
Stand
what
on
we're
your merit.
That's the whole Star Wars argument. Oh, if you read this comic book, it all makes sense. Like, nope, no, not seeing any. I'm not giving them more money. Like, you didn't give me the product I wanted, and you're when I complain, you're like, oh, you just need to give me a bit more money, and I'll give you more of the same.
Yeah. I hear you.
Suckers
For
gamble.
twice the price, you can have it for you can have it 6 weeks late.
Well, they got to take care of the rubes. That's how they get the
Yeah.
money. They need the rubes.
So yeah, that'll be our episode next week, and this has been our episode on the Matrix Revolutions with Mike C of Mechanical Dream Revolution. You can find the show notes and more, including links to his latest work, and his upcoming work will be pre-released on the show notes page. So that'll be at lastnarratives.com/177. And he also mentioned Boys Will Be Boys, which is another one of his albums. So there's going to be a whole host of listings of his work, and also his 13 prior appearances will all be showing on that page.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. So Mike,
a lot of
thanks
Mike.
for not phoning it in for us tonight. Robert and I we're not super enthusiastic about this, but you brought it tonight and also gave it the first ever 0 score. So that will be a momentous commemoration here. So anyway, everyone, we'll be back next week with the Animatrix with the Afrolibertarian. And you can support us at Patreon. Go to lastnarrative.com/Patreon or subscribe to us on YouTube and give us likes on the old Facebook page and things like that. You can also go to trubster.com and buy some of the wares, some of the artistic inventions that Robert has created. So that's TRUBBSTER.com. And those are some of the ways that you can support the show. Ratings and reviews and all those things are greatly appreciated. And we will see you guys all next week. And we'll say good night from last night, everyone. Peace out.